The Burning Platform, brought to you by Nando's. Every week we get to talk about things that are going on in society and politics and the economy and everything else. And Ivo's wife is there, who's a nurse. Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. I'm off to work.
How are the hospitals in the Eastern Cape? I heard you've been having a really tough time down there.
Well, we're in the Western Cape, so so we're at it. We're really busy. We're cheerful. We're getting on with it, and we just urge you all to stay safe, wear your masks. That's it, guys. Have a great Christmas. Okay.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas. Cheers.
Cheers. Well, on that note, Ivo, it hasn't all been easy down there because you guys on the garden route have had a very tough time lately, and I see that the numbers are a little bit higher than anyone would like them to be, obviously.
Well, before Ivo gets in, but I'd just like to toss in a point on a scientific basis, which Ivo has to take into account. And that is that everyone knows that the virus only affects people on beaches in the Western Cape, and it doesn't affect people on the beaches in KZN. And this is a scientific reality, and I'd like Ivo to address this, please.
Yeah, no, that's quite correct. That's quite correct. On our beaches, where there's almost nobody, even in season, you'd be hard pressed to throw a tennis ball at your nearest neighbor. You're at grave risk of contracting COVID. So what you should do is leave the beach and go to a bar, where you're separated from other people by maybe 1.5 meters, and you're indoors, and it's probably ill ventilated and so on. And you can stay in the bar until 10 p.m. because that's perfectly okay. You won't get COVID. After 10 p.m. you'll get COVID, but before 10 p.m. you're a-okay. Just whatever you do, don't go outdoors, because outdoors is dangerous.
Now, I know that you're being as sarcastic as you can be, but a lot of people who don't know you very well, Ivo, might think that you're being serious there for a second, because the government certainly are. And they come up with these capricious rules, and they have done since the beginning of lockdown. And it seems that they are punishing certain places more than others, that they are exercising a huge amount of restraints in certain places, but none at all in others. Why do you think they're taking it out on the beaches of the Western Cape more than anything else?
Well, I don't know. I find it really hard to believe that anyone with half a brain and good intentions could sit in a high-level meeting and say, well, indoor venues must be well ventilated, and also let's close the great outdoors and the wide open spaces. It makes absolutely no sense to me. We know, and there's evidence, there's scientific evidence and studies that have been done that finds that outdoor transmission or outdoor environments account for a very small percentage of COVID-19 transmissions. One study found 2.3%. The other one in China, they did a study with more than 7,000 cases. They had one incident involving 2 people that took place outdoors. COVID spreads indoors. So this whole idea of closing beaches and closing parks is completely nonsensical. And what it'll do is it will drive people to malls and restaurants and bars and indoor spaces, people's homes, where the virus will spread faster. So this is completely counterproductive. It's an absolutely flabbergasting decision. It makes no sense. So, yeah, the question then is, well, why? I speculated a bit about that in the column I wrote. It can't be to stop to curb the spread of COVID, because it doesn't. It does the exact opposite. So why would it do so? Well, one plausible motive is that what they actually want is to prevent holidaymakers from coming to the coast altogether. Right? And that's happening. We've had reports already that something like 80% of all our Airbnb and guest house bookings and so on have already been cancelled. It's going to be absolutely devastating for the economy of the garden route, which absolutely depends on tourism over the season. So that might be the actual intention, that they really don't want holidaymakers coming to the coast. But if that is so, then surely Ramaphosa should have said so. You can't have a family meeting and then sit there and just lie to the family about what your real intentions are. I mean that's it's no wonder that nobody trusts the government on this sort of stuff. Another motive could be that if you close urban beaches, right, like they've closed Durban's beaches on some days, which also makes no sense to me because you're pushing people to all the other days, which means you'll get overcrowding on all the other days. But if you're closing urban beaches because they are too overcrowded and people really don't distance, and there is evidence that that sort of thing, can cause COVID transmission. That if they then leave the other beaches, the extra urban beaches open, it might give the impression of racial favoritism. There was someone who calls themselves Marxist on Twitter who said Cyril Ramaphosa has closed all the beaches where majority of black people go to, all beaches where most white people go to remain open. Well, the thing is, this is a bogus argument, right? If the criterion is crowd density, then no further explanation is necessary. And there are plenty black and colored people on the beaches in the garden routes and the beaches in East Cape, the Sarah Baartman district, which includes Port Alfred and Jeffreys Bay, places like that.
Right.
They enjoy the beaches just as much as white people do. So it makes no sense to make this a racial issue. And even if you do think it gives a perception of racial bias, however wrong that perception is, right, that doesn't justify just going around and maximizing the economic carnage. I mean, it's an absolutely, it's just not a decision that I understand. It makes no sense whatsoever.
One of the reasons I was very keen to have you on for today's episode is because I know you've actually got a very different point of view to me and Kanthan and probably Pumi on this one too. You've been quite cautious about COVID. You've been very careful about it. You are personally concerned for your health. Your wife is obviously in healthcare. You think things like matric rage were a big mistake, and you don't like some of these very stupid rules that they've put in place about social distancing, but you are in favor of masks and so on. So I wanted to have you explain your point of view on that, and then where we do agree probably is on matters like the economy and keeping beaches open and things like that. Just because people always assume if you are of one point of view, then you must be of all the points of view on that side, and you definitely are not. So explain your position.
No, I'm not. I do take it seriously. I think it's a serious disease, and with my wife working at the local provincial hospital, I hear so many horror stories of people, even young and healthy people, right, that get COVID, and sometimes within a matter of hours, they fall sick enough to end up in ICU. And very often when you get to hospital and you suffer from shortness of breath, they send you for x-rays, and the radiologist will look at that x-ray and say, look, this is COVID lung. She sees the pneumonia. And it's a very bitter experience for her because she knows that nothing can be done. She looks at those pictures and says, well, this person's going to die within 2 days. Once it gets to that stage, COVID is a very, very vicious disease. So I do believe that it is worse than the flu, and that we ought to take reasonable precautions. Now, that doesn't mean shutting down the economy, right? Yeah. But I do think that social distancing and wearing masks, and the evidence on masks is a bit contradictory. Some say it doesn't work, some say it does work. But I think it does work as some sort of source control. You spit and produce less droplets and so on if you wear a mask. I think it's a reasonable precaution. It's not too great an imposition, and I think we ought to be safe, and especially around vulnerable people, older people. I think it's absolutely worth doing. Until we get a vaccine and we can hopefully shut the pandemic down that way.
So Pumi,
I do think it's a serious issue.
Pumi, what do you think of the closure of certain beaches on certain days, other beaches not? Does this make any sense to you? Because it's very hard for ordinary people to be able to know whether they're breaking the law or not. And the curfew is now changed back to 10 o'clock. So we're not sure if you're out at 11, you're breaking the law, aren't you? What's the story?
The curfew is actually 11 o'clock, Gareth. It's to allow people, businesses that are open until 10 o'clock, to give them an hour to get their teams home.
All right. Well, you see, I'm already confused. So, Pums, what do you think?
Look, this thing it's gonna be contentious here at home as it is everywhere across the world. The thing for me is that this is not uniquely happening to South Africa. We're not the only ones that have these restrictions placed on us. So I don't particularly agree with you, Ivor, that our government's intention is to kill people's businesses. I think that everywhere around the world, governments are all freaked out and governments are all trying to do the best with what they have, with the information they have at hand. And I do think that we have incredible overcrowding at beaches. And if we can limit that overcrowding, the problem with South Africans is that our country is lawless. And we know that our law enforcement, and this is always my case, is when you enact in law, you have to have a way of policing it. And we can't police it. So we need a different way, a different approach of getting people to understand the seriousness of what we are all dealing with. And that's not happening. I don't think that the curfews are going to work. I don't think that the shutdowns are going to work. I don't think that people are going to comply. And it's simply impossible for our police force to enforce it across everybody. But I don't think that the intention is specifically to kill people's businesses.
I have to challenge you on that. I mean, look, I agree with you that the lockdown measures, the alcohol measures, that they don't work, and especially in the townships, those taverns are going to buy during the week, and they're going to be selling out the back door on weekends. The lockdown has never worked in the townships. It works to some extent in the suburbs, which is more orderly and probably easier to police. So I agree with you that these lockdown measures don't work because we're a lawless society. But the thing with the beaches is that you can't treat the entire coastline between Port Alfred and Stilbaai as if it's the same as Durban's Golden Mile. I mean, it's not. We don't get those sort of crowds, right? Even in season, our beaches are not that busy. So how can you possibly say that you're taking a differentiated approach when you're treating the entire coastline as if it all looked like Adderley Beach in Durban? It just makes no sense to me. And when you know that outdoor transmission is much, much lower than indoor transmission, when you know that there's really no risk to people going to beaches, and you know that the entire economy of the Garden Route and places along the coast, small coastal towns, is based on tourism, and you know that tourism go to these places because of the beaches, they're going to go somewhere else if they can't go to the beach. Then well, certainly the effect, it might not be their stated intention, but certainly the effect is to destroy businesses, is to destroy the economy.
It's worth mentioning that there are loopholes that have developed. I mean, I saw a whole lot of people heading to the rivers instead of the beaches.
Yes, hold on.
There are videos circulating, and there's also a whole lot of loopholes in terms of permits that you can get. You've got a permit, right, Ivor? What's that?
There we go.
Fishing permit.
The last time I went fishing, I was 14, and I caught nothing, and I swore that I would never fish again. I and my wife are now the proud owners of a recreational fishing permit, because that is one way in which we can legally go onto the beaches.
How do you get one of those?
You go to the post office. You stay in this case of where I am.
You found a post office that actually functions.
What? Yes.
Fake news.
You're giving them money, and for that they function quite well. Mm-hmm. So you go to the post office. You get into a very long queue, which just snakes out the door.
Yeah.
Along with I saw a guy in an emergency services uniform, and I saw a police officer, and so on. You get there, and every single person has one of these blue forms, right? That's what they're there for, right? And you wait in the queue, and you pay your 76 Rand for an annual fishing license, and there you are. You're now officially a fisherman. You can call me Salty.
So, Kanthan, what do you make of all of this? Pumi and Ivor are at odds on whether or not the government is wantonly destroying things, but what do you think?
Well, I've been kind of sitting back through this conversation because I think we can spend as much time as we like trying to ascertain what people's motives are, but we can't really do that. And you know about Kant's axiom, which is never attribute to malice what is best explained by incompetence.
Yeah.
And in the case of our government, it's quite clear that by and large, the people who sit on our cabinet happen to be mentally deficient to some extent. and that, from my point of view, is really where all of this comes down to. What people don't actually get in terms of the way in which we engage with the various narratives around this stuff is that it's actually possible to hold views that, would be considered contradictory if you were taking a binary approach to it. For example, I wear a mask in public whenever I go out. I do social distance. I do make a point of actually sanitizing whenever I enter any particular environment. I avoid going to crowded places as far as possible. And, certainly it is absolutely my intention to make sure that my parents, who are in their 80s and, clearly are highly vulnerable, are highly unlikely to be able to contract this.
Right.
It's possible to also believe that COVID is very dangerous for a very small section of the populace, and that is a smaller percentage that actually get affected by the flu. It's also very possible to believe that children actually don't get affected by COVID. All of these things are not contradictory things. And really what we should be trying to do is, as far as possible, is to minimize the risk of infection without killing the economy. And the problem that we have, of course, is that people are not able to separate those two ideas in their head. And if we can get to the point where people actually realize that, yes, what we do need to be doing is allowing people who are less vulnerable to have access to social gatherings, because that's how you get to the point of herd immunity. And for those of you who are listening rather than seeing, I'm just indicating quotes with my fingers because, again, those are terms that all pick up all sorts of connotations. There's nothing wrong with holding these beliefs at the same time. Is it true that our hospitals are actually under pressure in a number of spaces? Yes, because I have doctor friends who work in those spaces. But is it also true that we actually have capacity in a number of places to be able to deal with this? Yes. Is it true that intensive care units are getting full in some scenarios, and that people are automatically being checked into ICUs because, hey, we've got expensive medical aid and we can afford to do this? Yes. Yeah. But again, all of these things are things that need to actually be managed. Shutting down the economy is absurd, because it's denying people agency. It's denying them the ability to actually feed themselves. And then you have unintended consequences. You have people who actually end up dying as a result of starvation. You have people dying as a result of depression. All of these things kick in. You have increased abuse in homes based on the fact that people end up being confined to quarters. We could go on about this. But can we stop being so binary about this and just get back to recognizing people need agency?
I mean, it's not just that, Kenton. It's when Ramaphosa said he's closing our beaches, my wife actually burst out crying. She said, because she works very, very hard. She's under a lot of pressure. These days she's testing or triaging probably about a couple of hundred people a day. It's hectic, and all of them pose a risk to her. She actually risks her life there. It's hectic. The place is full. It's a real nightmare at these hospitals. So her only, and of course now she has to isolate from other people, because the hospital can risk any of their staff getting sick, because they're already on about half staff because of COVID.
Right.
So they're understaffed. So she can't go and see friends after work. We can't go and have a relax somewhere. The only thing she can do is go to the beach, get her feet in the water, and watch the sunset. Right. That's her only way of relaxing after a hard day's work. Now Cyril's taken that away from her. You know, and it's not just her. I mean, it's all the healthcare workers. They're stressed, they're under strain. Now you're taking away all of their opportunities for relaxation and maybe resting your eyes in shades of green, as the old song says. You know, it just makes absolutely no sense. I mean, you say don't attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity. It doesn't matter whether it's malice or stupidity. What I always say is you can't judge laws by their intention. You need to judge laws by their effect.
Yeah.
Right. And if the effect is wrong, I don't care what your intention is. I don't care that you're trying to save lives or whatever.
Absolutely right, Ivo. And I'm saying that we spend far too much time trying to figure out what government's intent is in doing particular things, and we should be focusing on the effects.
But
and the effects
the unintended
effect.
Yeah, Pumi, sorry, I just want to give Pumi a chance here because she's been you just made a point and she wanted to argue with you about something. Go ahead, Pumi.
It's not an argument. I think one of the things that has happened to almost all of us this year with COVID is we have suddenly stopped looking at things that were always a problem. Our economy has been in decline for years. Guys.
Yeah.
Our economy was struggling a year ago. Our economy was struggling 2 years ago. And where we are now is compounded by the fact that there is this particular pandemic that also restricts the way that people move and the way that people are allowed. And again, I say, the lockdowns are not specific to our country. The lockdowns are not only designed for people in this country or white people or white businesses and targeting Airbnbs and small businesses. That's not what they are. And this country is not unique. What is unique to our country is the fact that we have had a struggling economy. And now nobody is looking at that. Nobody is saying, what do we need to do to fix the economy? The structural deficiencies in our economy were there 2 years ago. They were there 2 years ago. But now suddenly everybody can blame this other thing. You know, we can all say, yeah, COVID and the lockdowns. That's why people's businesses were suffering. We've stopped thinking about that. We've stopped thinking about that and thinking about solutions to that. And unfortunately, our government is incompetent in that fact. And they have used this opportunity of COVID to pull the wool over everybody's eyes. You know, they're like, we're doing something about the pandemic, and they're doing nothing about all of the things that should be done. That's the problem. You're right. For me.
But you can't say that we haven't been looking at that. I mean, you know, I write about these things all the time, and I've been writing about how to fix our broken economy for years. You know, the things government shouldn't do, things government should do, the things the rest of us can do to try and get out of this 0% growth, you know, this zero growth pit that we're in, or that we have been in for years. So, you know, I think we're well aware of that. This just gives the economy, it's almost like giving it the coup de grace, you know.
My God, you better have that cough looked at.
I do have a cough. I did have it looked at. It's very weird to be tested by your own wife in a hospital.
Ivo, you just need a calming cigarette. That will sort it out.
That's a very good idea.
Yes.
Guys, look, can we get off the garden route stuff now? Because I think we've killed about a half hour on this.
All right.
And Gareth, weren't we supposed to be giving people an opportunity to be asking questions this morning? I thought that was the master plan.
That is the master plan. So if you've got a question for Ivo, for Pumi, for Canton, you can ask away and we can try to answer your questions. I don't know whether we'll get it right. Some of us are not as smart as you hope we are. But I've tried to.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Canton, how are you feeling about the reinstatement of Mam Zandile Kumete down there in the KZN?
I vowed at the beginning of this year, Pumi, that I was not going to get into fuck debt, and that's exactly my scenario.
I mean, listen, season Ace Magashule says they can't fire him unless the NEC says so. So I think we just...
Yeah, look, Ace Magashule is a different scenario, guys. And again, you know, we've spoken about this before. Who the ANC pays out of their own coffers is entirely up to them.
Yeah.
But putting someone into public service where this person is going to be essentially paid by taxpayers, I have a problem with that. But clearly, I have no ability to enforce it. So what's the point?
What are you going to do? Yeah. Sorry about that.
I was looking on the, believe it or not, guys, the ANC website is up and running. It seems they have paid the service provider.
Oh, that's good news.
And I was looking to see who is on that subcommittee, the integrity committee. That list is not up on their site, but I was quite intrigued to see who is the person on the subcommittee for deployment. Do you guys know who it is?
Tell us.
There is one person in the deployment committee. One.
Who?
Cyril Ramaphosa. Cyril Ramaphosa. He is the only person in the deployment subcommittee, which means that in the ANC, the person who decides who is going to be deployed where is Cyril. And yet we keep learning that, he's hamstrung. He's hamstrung by the people he has to put in there. He's the only one. He's the only one. Every other committee has 10 people. Every other committee has 10 people, and deployment has only him. And yet we've been told countless times that he is hamstrung by the factions on who gets put where in government.
Poor Cyril.
Guys,
so hard.
The man has wanted to be the president for the longest time, and he did not know what he was going to do with the job when he gets it.
There's a question from Nikki and Graham. Gareth, you said you would play the Boney M game. What is the Boney M game?
That's where we basically acclimatize people to Boney M music before Christmas, so that when it hits them in the shopping mall in that week or two before Christmas, they're prepared psychologically for the onslaught and the fact that people are going to try and make you spend money that you shouldn't do.
Well, there's a pro tip here. If you do online shopping, you don't have to put up with Boney M music.
Well, here's a serious question. This one's from Cassandra. She says, how optimistic are each of you about next year, especially our financial state as a country? Are you going to black pill us here, Ivo?
Yeah, I mean, you said you didn't want to be negative, and because it's the last, festive season and last show, and we all need something to smile about. I'm sorry, but I'm very pessimistic about next year. We'll probably claw back some of the losses, but it'll take years for the economy to get back on its feet again. There's just so many businesses. Just around here, the tourism industry, we've already lost so many businesses. There are already so many people unemployed, so many people bankrupt. Selling their houses because they need to pay off debts. And now with the beaches closed, the season is going to save the remaining, the people that managed to survive so far.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be an absolutely horrible year. It's we're going to be. I think we're going to be in for a long depression.
What do you say, Pumi, Canton?
I'll let Pumi go first.
My optimism for the coming years is that these hard times make people angry, and they make people want change, and they make people act on that. When you're comfortable, you let things slide. And I think that we're in a situation in our country where people are sufficiently uncomfortable and sufficiently angry at what has happened to our country that people will make different decisions. So that I'm optimistic about. That's a good point.
That's a good point. The IRR, Frans Cronje, said that he's fairly confident that the ANC and ANC dominance is on its last legs. And before the whole coronavirus thing, he said that they might get voted, they might lose their absolute majority in maybe as early as 2024, but certainly probably by 2029.
Okay.
I think that this whole disaster, where yes, the coronavirus is serious and that's in itself a disaster, but I think the lockdown has been a far bigger disaster. millions out of work and so on. I think this might have accelerated the demise of the ANC, and I'm really hoping that people start looking at that the ANC simply is not delivering a better life for all. They're delivering a better life for Ace Magashule. And that guy with the 37 luxury cars in his basement, they're delivering a better life for themselves, but not for the people of South Africa. And in fact, they're actively causing harm. And hopefully that will change enough people's minds that the ANC will lose its 50% majority. And if it loses a 50% majority, things get interesting, because now you need to start looking at coalition governments. Right, okay. And then maybe the official opposition can create a coalition.
Which remains a double. Unfortunately, this is the double-edged sword of my optimism, is that unfortunately, the incompetence runs throughout our political parties.
No, that's true.
That's true. Look,
I'm a libertarian. I don't trust anyone in government. I think that the first reason to disqualify a politician is the desire to be one.
Yeah.
But something has to change, and I'm a lot happier living in the Western Cape as I am. And just look at the local hospital here. It's great. They had a staff member that just transferred from KwaZulu-Natal, and she can't believe at how luxurious our provincial hospital is. It's just night and day between KwaZulu-Natal and the Western Cape as to how public institutions are run. I have my problems with the DA, and I've never been shy at expressing them. But they do seem to be a lot better at running things and actually delivering services than the ANC is.
Well, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed is king. So it's not go.
No, exactly. No, exactly. The ANC sets a low bar, but the DA will certainly improve it.
Okay, Kanthan, you've held back now. Now, is there a reason? Is there anything you can give us that will make us feel more optimistic?
I think that we are an inherently resilient people. We are. And we have this ability to really take responsibility for ourselves. We've already seen so many people have been doing very practical stuff in terms of going off grid.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's actually going to be continuing. And I think that that's great. Remember, I started saying a few months ago that it's our patriotic duty to reduce the amount of tax that gets paid to this government at every conceivable level, because we need to defund the bastards. It is the only way that we are going to be able to wrest power from them. Right now, their power comes from the fact that they still have ample opportunity to continue stealing. So reduce the ability for them to steal, and it goes away. But we do know that right now that the mega pot that they still haven't gotten their hands on is our pension funds, and they are eyeing that with glee. So for my part, I've gone through the process of formally retiring, which I can do because I'm over 55, which effectively means that I'm not bound by Regulation 28, which limits where my money is able to be invested. So the idea is take as much money out of the country as you possibly can, make use of vehicles that government is not able to get their hands on, like cryptocurrencies, for example, is an effective way to keep your money out of the hands of government. And increase your self-sufficiency, go off grid in terms of electricity, go off grid in terms of water. Water is going to be a disaster, by the way, in the year ahead, because the maintenance of infrastructure is not happening, and that's not going to be fixed. Our backlog in terms of water infrastructure is so massive that right now, if you test your tap water in urban areas, I'm pretty sure that you'll find that there's some pretty disgusting stuff that's kind of floating around there. So at the same time, there are very effective ways of doing water harvesting and water treatment for drinking purposes at home. And these are all things that are actually becoming more and more affordable every year, mainly because of changes in terms of the underlying cost of the technology. So at that level, yes, I'm very hopeful.
Well, that's a good point. I think we all need to be able to look to ourselves, because we certainly, if you think that government are going to suddenly become brilliant, like Helen Ziller's said so many times, the capable state, then you've got another thing coming, I think, because that's not their business. They're not in the business of making things happen and making things work. They're in the business of screwing them up. That's what politicians are all over the world. So, without turning this into a bitch session, let's get back to the questions from this morning. Why is it that the ANC have walked the recent by-elections? When will people start punishing them for their pathetic incompetence? Gus, asking that. So,
they didn't actually walk the recent elections, because if you look in terms of what happened, the turnout was down across the board. So this comes back to a point that we've been making again in this space over the years, that until you can find people who are able to sufficiently inspire voters to get out there, the ANC is just simply going to win because of a sense of tiredness on the part of voters. Yes.
But also by sheer numbers. They still do a very good job of on-the-ground campaigning. They get the numbers. And if you have this is the thing I think South Africans also need to realize, is that democracy is not necessarily the will of the many. It is the will of the many who vote. So if you don't show up to the polls, you're stuck and saddled with the will of the many who have voted.
Yeah,
that's the challenge, and that's the challenge for the opposition parties. I mean, voting numbers, voting turnout has been decreasing over the years significantly. I mean, there are more people that don't vote than people who voted for the ANC. Now, the challenge for the opposition parties is to actually get those people to vote for them, rather than stay away from the polls. And that's not happening. And frankly, the DA has never really been particularly good at that. And I'm not at all confident. I don't see any signs that might be changing. So, that is.
But declining voter, but a declining voter base is also what happens in a comfortable environment where you have a stable. I mean, they see it in the USA as well, where they have when they have a stable government, when they have stability. And that's why I'm saying my optimism is based on the fact that as people get angry, people want to see change, and therefore they show up to the polls. So you look at
we haven't seen that. I mean, our declining numbers is because of disillusionment with politics. People believe that nothing is going to change, so their vote doesn't really matter. We certainly don't have a stable, comfortable country and economy.
But the reason for that being, and this is why I saw somebody making a mention of the fact that we say the opposition parties are shit, right? The reason why there's apathy is because people don't see themselves represented by the opposition parties. The opposition parties Correct. Are so polarized. That's why they are shockingly shit, right? Is if I cannot see myself being represented by any of the opposition parties, and I don't see myself being represented by the ANC, people then go, what am I voting? Why am I voting? That's where
quite right.
That's where and this is just as a response to the comments. I forgot who made the comment, but that's the reason. That's the reason the apathy is there. It's because nobody, as Captain says, is inspiring.
Yeah, guys, I just want to touch on something that someone asked here on the webinar chat. Dunk wants to know what happened with the ZACP and what's going to be happening.
We get one of those every week, so come on, Canton.
Well, you see, one of the things that I wanted to point out was, the 10 of us who had gone into the last election were all doing so from the basis of a national platform. And clearly the next national election is going to be in a few years' time. So, and certainly those of us who are currently out earning a living have no, intention of basically committing ourselves to that process in the meanwhile. But here's what an interesting thought experiment, guys. You see, a lot of people have been saying, but we want to actually contest the local government elections next year under the ZACP. And can we go about doing this, and what should we be doing about it? My philosophical thought on this right now is that it's really difficult to find a way to actually engage with the local government elections without effectively handing the elections to the ANC. So consider this right now, that a lot of the reason why, for example, there was a dilution of the DA's base in the last round of by-elections is because of the fact that votes that used to go to the DA now went to people like the Good Party, as an example. So if in many of those constituencies, if you take a breakdown of where all the votes went to and take all of the opposition votes and put them all together, they actually exceed the votes that went to the ANC. But because of the fact that it ends up being first past the post, the ANC ended up picking up those constituencies.
Right.
Do we want to have a scenario where we're adding yet more parties into the mix? So now you're going to be having the party of Herman Mashaba, you're going to be having the party of Musi Maimane, and effectively all of those are going to be diluting the votes that would otherwise be going to actually unseat the ANC from those constituencies. Consider that the EFF did not win a single seat in those by-elections.
Yeah.
For exactly those reasons,
and have not increased their lead at all in any election for the last few, including the national election.
Exactly. So the scenario that we have right now is that if we're going to have any party that's going to be wanting to contest the local government election on any of the principles that the ZACP used to espouse, there needs to be a very strategic mindset in terms of what do you do so that you're not further diluting the vote and effectively handing that seat to the ANC. And I don't believe that the way in which you do that is going to be by having a coalition of the opposition and trying to decide among you who's going to be contesting and who is not going to be contesting. Really, what needs to be happening is that you need to have champions in each constituency or in each ward who are able to go out there and gather enough signatures. And if the percentage of signatures that they gather is at a level where it's enough to challenge the ANC successfully in that constituency, then and only then should one be challenging that constituency. But this obviously requires people to be spending a lot more time on strategic planning on how one does this. I think to a large extent, the people who do have the intellectual capacity to do this, Ivo, are in fact Frans Cronje's team at the IRR. But I don't think they've actually applied their minds to doing that type of thing properly. So I think that the local government elections are not going to be an opportunity to do anything constructive because the DA has not been able to successfully capture imagination with its current crop of leadership. And at that level, I can't see them unseating the ANC.
Kanthan, what you're saying, it all sounds like an argument to say, well, just hold your noses and vote for the DA because you don't want to dilute the opposition vote. And basically get everyone, including people who now vote for Freedom Front and Good and Herman's party, to say, well, just vote DA so that the DA can then unseat the ANC by getting an absolute majority.
Is that what you're
No,
I don't see that as a
Ivo, I think that's one conclusion that people draw, and I think it's an argument that the DA advances all the time. And I would be very happy to do that if not for the fact that the DA still supports this absurd notion of a capable state.
All right.
And if we look at in terms of the way in which Alan, how do you pronounce his last name anyway? Is it Windy or is it Winde? Yeah. Okay. Well,
I think it's Windy.
Yeah, but he's been less than inspiring in terms of his ability to actually take on this government. So what I'm saying is that yes, that's an argument that the DA works, but I'm not buying it because I don't believe that they actually have the leadership cojones within their structures right now to be able to run this country successfully.
Yeah, you see, I see. It strikes me as far more likely that the future of this country lies in coalition politics. Because I can't see the DA ever getting to 50%. It's just they've got too much baggage. There's too much of an image problem there. They're not very good at PR. They haven't been very good. Yes, they've reached out to across the color lines and across the race lines to some extent. Calling them a white party, I think, is unfair on them. But they've really never threatened to go much beyond 25%. So I really think that the future lies in coalition politics, getting the ANC below 50%, and then cobbling together a coalition from the rest to actually rule, municipalities, provinces, and ultimately the country. I can't see.
In terms of the national elections, you're absolutely right, because in terms of the national elections, you can't dilute the vote, because every vote that actually counts out there. And in fact, the smaller parties in the national elections get a disproportionately high allocation of seats. And so coalition politics, because of the fact that we've got proportional representation, is actually possible in terms of the national elections. In terms of ward-based elections, which is what the local government elections are all about, you can't really have a coalition there, because you can only say we're going to step out of this particular election to not hand it to the ANC.
I'm gonna call it quits on this discussion, because there's a very specific question for Ivo here, and then you can all just weigh in with your final thoughts, because we do have to wrap it up. Ivo, someone wants to know, what do you think of Cape independence?
I think Cape independence is an awesome idea, and I think this Beach's decision just underscores why. The Cape cannot rely on the national government to act in its best interests. It really is a problem, and I think the Cape is sufficiently different. It's been voting against the national government now for well over a decade, probably longer. I can't remember exactly when the DA took over, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So the people in the Western Cape are simply not represented in the national government, and the national government is not acting in the interests of the Western Cape. I think there's a very, very good case for Cape independence. I do not believe that this is an idea of a white homeland or a Buddha state or whatever, because it's not. I mean, whites are in the minority in the Western Cape. It's a small minority. We're only about a quarter or so of the population. Right? And the rest is coloured and black. So it's absolutely not a racial state in any sense. It is simply that we are not being served by the policies of the national government. And I'm absolutely support Cape independence. I think, as I wrote a few months ago, it's an idea whose time has come.
All right. For closing ideas, closing thoughts, we'll start, ladies. Pumi, you go ahead. Your thoughts on 2021, apart from the things you've already said about how, it's got to get a whole lot worse before it gets better and people will be angry enough to bring about change. Are there green shoots you've seen anywhere? Are there things you're excited about? Are there shenanigans that you're hoping to be entertained by in the new year?
There are many shenanigans that are going to entertain us, starting with Judge Zondo at the Concord on the 29th. Yeah. And we saw the letter coming from the esteemed gentleman at Mabuza and Associates about whether our former president will be showing up or not. He is no longer participating in this farce. Mm-hmm. So there are many things that are going to happen early in the new year that will be entertaining but will not be funny. I think that, look, I do also think, and this is the one thing that I'd like to just leave all the people with, is there is not a lot to be optimistic about, but that does not mean that we all have to be shits. I think we have the agency as individuals to at least be kinder to each other. We don't have to get into fights. We can have opposing views and still be civilized with each other. And we just need, that's a little bit that we can all do as individuals to make the bad experience a little bit more tolerable for all of us. You can have different opinions. You just don't have to be a little fit about it. As long as you can advance your comment or your opinion or your argument and allow the other person to do the same. You don't have to agree, but you don't have to fight.
I love that. And it's one of the things we try to do here on this show. Kanthan, your closing comments?
I think I'm going to go with Pumi on this one, Gareth.
You lazy bastard.
I told you, everybody's exhausted. Even Kanthan's exhausted.
No, I'm not at all exhausted. I think that's actually a very good note to end this on. There's goes back to the point that I was making earlier. I have inherent faith in the resilience of South Africans. I think that we really are quite amazing simply because we've had to put up with so much cuck for so long.
Yeah.
And that actually teaches us to do, truly world-class stuff.
Well, lady and gentlemen, and to everybody else who's enjoyed the Burning Platform over the course of the last few months, thank you for being a part of it. It continues to be a place where all opinions are welcome, where we can disagree, as Pumi puts it, in a collegial manner, where we can have discussions, where we can make fun but not be mean, not have to be shits, as Pumi put it. And I think that this is really something that I look forward to in 2021, is actually unpacking and talking about the issues that you don't get a good feel for on mainstream media, I'm afraid. I'd love to give them credit, but they just aren't doing their job. And this is one of the places where we will continue to do that job, whether they do or not. We're going to do it because we want to. We want to make it count. We want to hear different opinions, and we want to give you a place to put your voice out. Yes, Ivo.
And a great job you're doing at it too. It's a really great show that you keep putting on, Gareth. Kudos to you.
If it wasn't for our listeners, it wouldn't be worth it, because I'd be sitting here talking to you guys, and we might as well just have a dinner party. If that's true.
That would just be weird, wouldn't it?
It would be. It would be so weird. I can't imagine actually being in a physical room with the three of you, but we'll see. Maybe it's possible in 2021. We can hold thumbs up.
Remember.
I just wish to point out I have been in a physical room with Gareth this year.
That's true, actually. Yeah. All right, Pumi, thank you. Happy Christmas, Ivo and Kanthan and Pumi, and I hope that we'll see all of you in 2021 healthy. And please, Ivo, get that cough sorted out. You are in a hot spot.
Yeah, no, exactly. It scares people. It keeps them away from me. So it has a good purpose.
Okay. Yeah, antisocial. All right, thanks very much, everybody. Have a happy day.